Good morning, gentlemen. I am joined this morning. We've actually got quite a few changes. We mentioned this last week that I am now the new host going forward. And actually, today is our official change of name. We went from armchair to now beyond the sermon as we go forward. So I am joined this morning. Well, I don't know when you're listening to it, but for us, it's still sort of morning. By Dr. Paul Suich and Dr. John Fullerton here, both pastors here at FPC. So, good morning.
Hey, Josh, this is also, I believe it was what a great transition is that this should be about episode 200.
200 yes, it is. Yeah. Which is
armchair 200 is the moment we flip the switch. So that's a pretty cool transition moment. So well planned.
Yes. Oh yeah, it was the plan I've had for years. Sure. Dr. Paul, glad you're joining us. You got the opportunity to preach in classic, and actually in a strange turn of events, covered for Ed and then for me, and then you were up. So yeah.
I told everyone that I was the C squad, that I was here because they really needed to pray for Ed Diaz, who's recovering from some surgery and infections, and that Ed was only there because blah blah blah. That Zach was out of town, and that I was the C team. And I said, listen, I'm going to try and make it as close to the wedding of Cana as possible. We're at the end of the wedding feast, and they bring out the good stuff.
Yeah, I like that. I love it.
Well done. Well played.
You're by no means a C team in my eyes. Well, we're in a series, we've been in a series about the deadly sins, and we highlighted greed this week. And I found it interesting. I got to watch both of y'all's sermons, that both of you had a story about money in particular, and really about the holding on to it, or the control of it, or the letting go of it in one way or the other. And so that certainly is kind of one direction to take greed. But because we've highlighted, I feel like, these other sins, we've mentioned many times, there's overlap with some of these sins, right? And so I think here in America, it makes sense that we would highlight, what do we commit ourselves to our money, and where we put our money really is kind of where our heart is, where our worship is. And so my first question for you two this morning is, consumerism is, and I hate to put it in these terms, but really is kind of the god of America, in the sense of how much can I make? What's the fullest I can push myself to? And do I ever stop, or do I just keep getting more and more and more? And, being raised in America. So on one hand, it's like we love America because we have the freedom to pursue maybe a new startup job, or find interesting ways through capitalism to go directly to the people and make money. So it's like, it's a blessing on one hand, but because of sin, there's this darker side to it, and we're really raised in a culture of it. And so I wonder, you would almost have to be an outsider to America to even see it correctly, right? Because we're around it so much that all of us, even if we recognize it, go like, well, my consumerism's not as bad as so-and-so. So my question is, how do we combat this problem when we're really kind of raised in it and it's hard to see?
I would say I started my sermon with the work of Paul Piff, who he just has study after study after study. One of his studies, he just went in California. If a pedestrian is standing on the curb and is about to step into the zebra crosswalk, it is the law that you must stop. You don't wait until they're in the middle of the pedestrian zone. And so he set up, he had a research participant stand there and be looking at traffic. And the question is, which cars stopped and which cars sped on? Guess which kind of cars stopped? Honda Civics, old Chevy Caprices. Guess which cars blew through? Mercedes, Porsches, Ferraris. The more expensive the car, the more likely the driver was to blow through. And that the stat that I quoted, that people who make over $150,000 a year kept ever so much more of their money. It was rare for a rich person to share his $10. You make 150K a year, $10 is what you pay for a Coke at the ballpark. It is not skin off your nose. But it's the same. I quoted a study years ago at Princeton Seminary, and the seminary students were to preach on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And while they're waiting in the room and they're told, listen, it's time for you to move from this room, you go across the campus and it's your turn to preach. They pass by a research participant who's on the ground throwing up. The majority of the seminary students walk by him so they can deliver their sermon and get a grade.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dang.
Yeah.
That's us. And so either you see it and you say, yes, we do, or you realize you are in denial. If you can't see your sin, then you're in that 1 John category of saying, I don't sin. This is a problem of other people. Other people do the bad thing. That's not me.
Nancy, a mutual friend of Paul's and mine is Nancy Cahan. She was an interim exec around here. And one of the things she used to say, and this is partly how I come at my answer to your question, Josh. One of the things that Nancy would say is one of the jobs of a leader in the church, she said it this way, is to pay attention. Just notice the way of the world. Just notice the way of people. Notice what we see and what we're blind to as well. And I think part when I think about the answer, how do we address the consumption mindset of our society, which has this problematic issue that we talked about this weekend of greed sort of baked into it. How do we address it? How do we assess it? And I think part of it is to somehow see it. And I think it's whichever one of you guys said that sometimes we need to step out completely outside of our own context in order to see something that's true about us that we can't see otherwise. And I it's interesting you asked that question because I just got back from Pakistan, a week and a half ago, and we asked a group of students there. These are all leaders. These are young leaders in this college. All kinds of questions. One of them was they gave them a chance to ask questions about America. What do you guys have about America? And so they were just really hesitant because they know that we're also providing, we as the American representatives before them are a source of, financial gain for the college. So they didn't want to be unpleasant about it. But we finally prompted them and said, okay, we'll just talk about what you think about with politics, the current politics. And the energy just shifted in the room. They just said, they said two things. One of them was funny. They said, right now it looks like a circus over there, which is one thing. So that was really interesting to say, well, people are like, well, it feels like a circus here too, but it's interesting that you see that as well. And then the other thing that was said was, but we have to respect what you've brought to the table, the fact that that your country has figured out how to do certain things that have made you successful. Point of that is to say that these are people who are not Americans looking back into the American culture, and they are seeing things, and it's kind of that way you see it from a different angle. And I think that we have a responsibility to say, okay, are we looking at the things of this world with that same way? Because I think if we do, we would see the problems that you're bringing up with the consumption mindset.
Yeah, a practical thing would be to get everybody in the church on a rotating basis to go to Kenya or to Pakistan or to Mexico and meet the Christians there, pray with them, see what life is like when you don't have an iPhone 16 or an automobile, and how is it that life is good with Christ when you don't have the stuff that we think is, oh, God doesn't love me because I don't have an iPhone 16 or a car that's less than 3 years old.
Great point.
Yeah, it would be funny to see some of us complaining about our issues in front of people in
Amen.
other areas, and them overhear us and go, I that's not even a world I could imagine that you're talking about, and yet you're complaining about it. So yeah, okay. So highlighting it, talking about it, and really wrestling with it. Yeah, for me, as I think about those who might be somewhat blinded to this, or maybe naive to how much it's infiltrated our world, to maybe take a look around my own house or what I have and go, what is it about my lifestyle that that where am I pouring my life into? Because I'll see a lot of it, where I'll see I have the trinkets and I have multiples of them, and where's a great place to start in maybe learning either discipline or to give them away, or how does that even, yeah. So what would you so this is not on the list of questions, but I think it connects to this, but
He's going rogue now.
I'm going rogue, yes, always. If you've heard this message and you've not considered it, maybe you've had your eyes open because you went on a trip, or the joke in Ohio where I used to live was Toledo, Ohio was always like the one city that was dumped on. It's like, you don't even have to go overseas. Go to Toledo, Ohio. You'll see what the slums are. Or whatever. And sorry if we have any Toledians listening, but where would you start? Like, or maybe you've already had rhythms of this in your own life in the past where you were like, hey, have I really considered that maybe I've bought into a subtle sin that I wasn't paying attention to? Because that's the thing about greed, I think, is it sneaks up on us. What's your first step? So it's recognizing it, seeing it, and then what?
Well, let me jump in with this. Take something away.
Mm-hmm.
Start there. Take just some of the you're talking about the trinkets, the things, the material possessions you have around your life, the things that are in the bank account. Start taking some of those things away. Just if you want to find out what you really think about them.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned my car in the message. If I've got a Mustang for a long time, it's like, man, I'm overly attached to this Mustang right now, and I really truly, and I said it, and I'd like to think that I'd be very if I got into it was wrecked, and I'd be very sad if it was stolen, but I'd be okay. Take something away and see how you do.
That's great. Yeah.
So I know that one of the unanswered questions that I left open in my sermon was that for the rich young ruler, Jesus said, if you want to have eternal life, you go home and you sell everything you own. You want to swim in the ocean? Get rid of all your lead weights, get rid of the anchor, get rid of your collection of lead sinks. Just get rid of them. Just give everything away. It's drowning you. And then come back and follow me, and you will have eternal life. And we would know what the guy's name is. He would have been there. And he walks away sad.
Yeah.
Then in the Gospel of Luke, in chapter 12, Jesus goes on to say, sell your possessions, give to the poor. But he doesn't answer the question, is everybody the rich young ruler? Are you so attached to your stuff that if you're going to survive, you need to make a clean break? Or is he just saying, sell some of your stuff? But there is no case in which Jesus just says, live rich. Don't worry about it. And so, but for each of us, what is that response? That's one I think that the Spirit has to guide us.
Yeah,
to make a decision of faith. Not a decision of the law, but a decision of faith. That we're not commanded to tithe. We're commanded to be generous. And for a lot of people, like who is it, Templeton, lived on 10% of his income and he gave away 90%, right? Some of us can do that. And some of us can give away the average American gives uno, dos, tres, 3% of their income. So most everybody can give away 3%. Even if you are, secretary and an auto mechanic, you can give away 3%. But 10% may not be a realistic goal, and 20% is out of the question. Whereas I think a lot of us could easily give away more.
Yeah. Well, I think both of y'all bring up excellent points, and I wonder if the average American is, maybe we certainly have our trinkets, right? But if it's more the lifestyle that we live. And so I was talking to an individual, and basically their job was eating up kind of all their time with their kids and just putting this person in a bad mood all the time. And I said, yeah, it sounds like that's not the job for you. Like, you should probably start looking for something else that has a better rhythm of work, family life sort of thing. But then the response was, well, but we have this house and I couldn't afford. And so, I let it hang there, but in my head, I'm going, well, right. Yes. If you want the thing you want, you're going to have to get rid of some things. Right. So to Paul's point, if you want Jesus and his kingdom, you're going to have to take the load off your back so that you can, swim, in the analogy that he used. And it's a systematic problem. And I think that is overwhelming for most individuals who go, oh, so it's the house we'd have to downgrade. It's in our entire livelihood. And you go, yes, it might not be an overnight thing, but perhaps that's what God is calling us to do, is live in an entirely different way.
I love that. And I love that. I love that we have the freedom to make a choice. And I don't know that most people think that through that way, that we have the freedom to make a choice. We can, if something is not working for us, if to your example, the family is suffering, or my health is suffering, or my spiritual life is suffering. I had a guy tell me one time when I was whining about one of those things to him, and he said, well, John, whose fault is that? And it just stopped me short. And I said, because I knew the answer. The answer is that it's my fault that I have controls. And that was his point, that you have control. You can make some decisions. So I think first off is to realize we have freedom to make those decisions. And the second one is to have the courage to make the decisions. Man. If in fact this thing is causing us to suffer, then have the courage and not let pride stiffen the will, or just whatever fear drive the ship. That just have the courage to do the things that right size your life to allow you to have the things that you want to have out of life. And those are both two really important things, I think. You realize that you have the freedom, you have the ability within you to make those choices. And second, it's going to take some courage to make those choices, but you do that, like any choice, you do it because you see the positive gain, the better gain that comes out of it.
And there's going to be a lot of those decisions. Like if you choose, fasting is coming up this week. If you choose to fast, if you sit around all day and think about all the food you're not eating, I guarantee the outcome of that. You will be stuffing food into your face. You've got umpteen choices across the day of how, when you are hungry, how will that prompt you to pray? How will that prompt you to engage yourself? And what will you remind yourself? Will you hold up the goal? Will you contrast it with, but you got it. And with spending, like you say, you've committed to a mortgage that is 49% of your disposable income. Yep. You have a tough set of decisions ahead of you if you want to be able to sell some of your possessions to give to the poor.
And I think there's this is the importance, I think, of communities, to be around people who have done that. Maybe they've already taken the courageous route of slimming down, if you will, and finding the margin. to hear those stories and to share those stories, to go, because that's the hard part, right? Is I might not have the courage, but to hear someone else go, oh, I've done it, and I can walk with you through this, or here at least are some ideas. Maybe you're not going to get to that 90% giveaway, but could you work up to 40%, right? Like, are there ways to kind of downsize? And I think being in a community where we encourage one another towards these things is really important. But I know, because money can often be an awkward conversation, maybe some of that, gets stifled. And that really brings me to the next question, which is, you've probably, especially Paul, as you've counseling, and John, you counsel as well. There's a large group of church attenders, really starting with mainly millennials, who have grown up with a reluctance and even a distrust of large organizations like the government, military, and unfortunately the church being a part of that. And there's been numerous scandals of money stolen or used wrong, or the preacher bought himself a helicopter, for Jesus. I always find it ironic that
noise in the back parking lot. I knew it was something.
I'm like, why not? If God's so good, give everyone helicopters. But I digress. So when it comes to tithing and the conversation of money, there is kind of automatically a distrust with especially my age group when it comes to that. And so that's why we find the statistics dip pretty hard, I think, with millennials. And I honestly don't have the statistics for Gen Z right now. They're much different than my age group. But so if that's in the back of some of our congregates' mind of, why should I trust you with my money, or I just don't trust anyone, it might not even be us specifically. How do we as church leaders gain their trust in this, and how do we encourage them to get beyond maybe this hurdle in a way that would be like first steps to trying out trust? Because, like, as you guys know, in any relationship, until you've placed some kind of trust, it's not a real relationship, right? And so until we kind of put money on the line, so to speak, how do I
Josh,
know I'm really leaning in?
are these people who are with us already? Are they in the congregation that you're talking about, these particular ones? Or are we talking about all millennials, all places?
I would talk about in our congregation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my response to anybody who has found something meaningful in our congregation would be, it's kind of the old public television mantra, is that we are member supported. And just to remind them that all the things that you are currently enjoying here, everything about the here now, it's a very practical message. The first thing that comes to my mind. So I know there's a theoretical part that we would need to frame, and that's a kind of a lifetime of stewardship. But the very practical part of it is that you like coming to the worship services, you like showing up and having the building available and open to have the group times in there. Well, guess all this happens. I mean, that's just completely practical, and that is that. So yes, you can have the sort of distrust of institutions in particular, but this institution happens because members and people here make it happen, and we go as far as everybody will go, and so and we're all in. I mean, we're part of this. We expect everybody to be in. So that's my first out of the box reaction. It's later. I'm happy to come back in and talk about generosity and failure. I mean, I think it's fair to talk about where we've gotten where the church has gotten it wrong in the past. I think we need to own up to that, and then question, even in the middle of that, does that therefore mean, because the churches have gotten it wrong in places and this church has gotten it wrong in the past as well, does that therefore mean that we no longer value what this church is about? We value what the spiritual gains that are taking place here, and we will shut off the stream of revenue so that it eventually will shut down being the church. So I mean, that's a line of thinking that can come second. The first one is, it all happens because of us. So I'm very, very encouraged and happy and eager to talk with people about it. And I say to the membership classes pretty regularly as well. I think everybody should give to the church, because I think it's the bride of Christ. It's an amazing entity, and this church does amazing things as well. And I want anybody who's part of it to buy into that. And I mean, literally, it gets to buy and give to it. So that would be my message to millennials. That I get it, and I get that there's been. I mean, Paul and I have not. Our helicopters are still being painted right now, so we're trying to. They're not ready for us to be brought in yet, but we've got room out back for the helipad, so we're going to get that in place. But no, that some of the crazy things you read about. Yeah, I mean, some people would say some of the things we're doing here is maybe a bit crazy because we're a big church and doing lots of things, and it takes a lot to keep buildings and grounds up, and that's all true. But the starting point is it's a pretty cool church, and it's a pretty cool ministry, and we all make that happen together.
And the cool church is the 1,000 people that comprise it.
Yeah.
Right. We have a giant campus. We have a big campus. We have lots of buildings. There's lots of air conditioners that sometimes work and sometimes don't.
Mostly not. Yeah.
Mostly not. But our
Completely.
used a lot. They're not idle from
Right.
Sunday afternoon until Sunday morning. They
Oh,
are
I looked
used.
it up again. It was Andrea posted it 97. That's the number. 97
Average
events
average
per week,
activities per
per
week.
year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And so
97.
the church is the people. And I've seen, okay, so there are millennials that say, hey, you know what, I really distrust bricks and mortar, and I don't want to give my money to bricks and mortar. But you know what, I've seen lots of boomers sitting on top of gigantic piles of money, and they look at their excess, and they'll drop a $20 bill into the plate when they have incredible wealth. And John, one of the things that's been so impressive is how you've connected with people in this congregation, and it is through trust and it's through the building of relationships that you have these conversations with people where they move into generosity. They ask you, hey, what need can I meet with this pile of dirt?
Yeah.
Here, go for
Right.
it.
That you're right, though. It is. I mean, all of this comes down to, Josh, and part of to answer your question, that I would echo what Paul's saying, and that's part of what I'm saying. It really is great relationships are happening here. And out of those great relationships, we are seeking to disciple one another. And then out of discipleship comes an understanding that God cares about our attitude towards and our practices with our material resources. And we just continue to have those conversations. And out of those conversations, I do get the privilege of being able to sit down with people, say, how can we, help you find your own place of generosity and stewardship, giving, towards God's causes in this church. And that's pretty fun to see it happen.
That's so cool.
Because you see sort of the spiritual light bulbs going off. And it's a different mindset. Millennials may be asking, I don't trust you guys. And then we're like, no, I get to be a part of moving the mission forward.
Yeah, this will date me a little bit, but do you guys remember Napster? Remember Napster?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Very illegal. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there's LimeWire too. And the thing with Napster when it came out was obviously that it just was stealing at the end of the day. There's really kind of no way around that. There were files being shared that were not bought and so forth. And as a teen, I'm just like downloading. I'm the part of the problem. But I remember one of my bands that I loved, who ordinarily I would buy their CD. That's how old I am. We had CDs, but physical ones. And
hang on, Josh. You're talking to Paul and to me.
Well, I'm trying to throw myself under the bus here. Yeah. Well, so they went.
You bought a certificate of deposit?
Yeah, exactly.
So
the band closed up, and their response was, because our music was being stolen, we made no sales, so we couldn't afford to be a band anymore. And it hit me like an arrow to be like, I was part of the demise of something I loved because I wasn't willing to put money into something that I want to see go forward. And so I often feel like that is part of being anything, right? Is in the church, is if I love being a part of this congregation, there is an ownership to it, that I get to see it go forward and grow. And yes, even correct. There could be some ways that we wander off or aren't spending money in the right way or whatever, and that you get ownership of that as a member to be a part of, like you said, this growing faith in this community. And if you love something, you'd be willing to shell out some money to see it continue forward, you know?
I like your word ownership too. There's a pastor in a large church in South Carolina. They did not use the term membership for the people of the church. They were not members. He called them owners, which I never could quite get with him because Christ is the owner of the church. And so,
Yes.
so that was my mind too, couldn't get past that. But his point was members have privileges and owners have responsibilities.
Mm.
Well, you should go with shareholders.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Family shareholders.
Yeah.
I love that.
But ultimately, it's honoring the skepticism of the millennial and the boomer. It's not one or the other.
Sure.
It's help meeting them with their initial skepticism that what you guys are about, this is you just want to stuff money in your pockets, and you're not really doing ministry. You're just here for the self-aggrandizement. You know what? We know plenty of people who fit that bill. If that's what you're concerned about, I believe you. You're right. There are people that do that, and come talk to me about how you've been burned and what is it, and what is, if you are the pure in heart, Jesus promised that you would see God. Come talk to me.
Amen.
As opposed to standing in judgment of them.
Right.
Yeah. Engage. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we're gonna take a little pause here, and then we're gonna get back to our Grow Group questions here in a little bit. So we'll be right back. All right, guys, we're back with the section where I asked the two speakers maybe what questions could the Grow Groups go in, or small groups go in if they were to ask the different members of their groups. So I'm going to start with Paul. Paul, what questions would you maybe lead with?
So in Luke 12, Jesus says point blank, straight up, sell your possessions, give to the poor. What has to happen so that you are glad that Jesus, the great physician, has come in to say, here is the cancer that we're getting rid of?
Man.
If your doctor came in and said, hey, bad news is you have this cancer, and the good news is we can get rid of it. You'd be like, okay, how, doc? How? Tell me how. What do I need to drink? How do you need to burn me? What do you need to cut off? I will do this. Then we'd be glad. And that's what we need. I think that's it. If we're in a grow group and we're going to grow, you need to be glad that Jesus is asking or telling, because otherwise we're either going to be legalists or we're going to be in flight.
That's great. Yeah. Any other questions you would or directions you would take it?
Well, obviously, I'm going to send them to watch a couple of. There's Paul Piff does a TED Talk. I'd have them watch that TED Talk and say, "So, where are you? What do you see?" And get them to wrestle with: Do we see our own greed?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that's
the prophetic part.
Do I even see it?
Prophetic part is, do you see it? And the grace part is, do you see how much you're loved? Do you see that Jesus takes care of moths and snails and hummingbirds? And if he can take care of all the ants in the world, he can absolutely take care of you.
That comes back to the trust question. Do you trust him? And this goes back to the garden. We didn't talk about this. I didn't talk about this in my message. But the one of the core issues in the Garden of Eden was the distrust. Maybe God is not good, and maybe God is holding back. Maybe he's not going to provide for me. So I therefore need to take over ownership of that and do it myself. By the way, Josh, I would sit down at the with my grow group and just look those other people right in the eyes and just blab out my greed, gluttony, and lust. To go cover all three sermons next 3 weeks. Greed, gluttony. Just start confessing. Just turn it into a blabbering confessional booth right there, which is only partly a joke, because the truth of that is, like, is there somebody with whom you can actually be honest?
Yeah.
I mean, and all these topics, your pride, envy. I mean, everything we talked about. Is there somebody with? I mean, I guess it's part of a question of, there's like 3 different levels, types of groups. Some are going to deal with the superficial. Some are going to deal with some things. Some are going to be like stand, just open, vulnerable before everyone else. And so, at what level is our group going to be honest?
Yeah. Amen.
I read a book years ago that
starts with the leader first, right? So I'm sorry, Paul, what were you saying?
I read a book years ago, and they said, here's a magic chair. If you sit in this chair, all of your sins are going to be displayed on this large screen above you. Which of you would like to be first? The answer is no one, if you believe that you live in the context of judgment, and everyone, if you believe that the first person in grabs the grace first.
Well,
don't hesitate. You go straight to it if you believe that you live in a grace-rich environment.
Yeah,
I do. The ability to find a grace-rich environment, though, I hope that these grow groups can continue to, if they're not that currently, that they can become a grace-rich environment. And out of that grace-rich environment, we have the ability to stand vulnerable before other people and say, I have shortcomings, I have failures, and everyone meets that with, you're okay with me. God's grace covers that, just like He covers everything. So I think, that really, I say it with a bit of playfulness when I say just confess everything, but I say it with seriousness as well. As like, if not in a grow group, is there a setting where that sort of safe, vulnerable place can be met with that grace? Is that place available?
Yeah, if you don't ever trust it enough to try it, you won't ever believe it.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, you have this, and people come to you. You are that safe place for people. They will come in and they will say, these are the things, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, and these are my sins for which I'm sorry for. It's been 6 months since my last confession, and these are my sins for which I'm sorry for. No, they'll come in and just bare their souls to you.
Right. And like Father Brown, I try to send them back out to be honest with the people that they have sinned against.
Well,
if you can experience grace here, how do you live in grace there? So, okay, well, that was my call to my next thing. So I'm going to let you guys finish. Thanks, you so much.
Thank you for joining us,
that's Budapest behind you, right?
That is Budapest at night. It is. You ever get a chance to go, you need to go.
We fly Paul in with his helicopter every
day. A long helicopter ride.
My mythical helicopter. Yeah.
That's great. See you, Paul. Well, John,
what do we do now? Just you and me.
Yeah. I think you guys are highlighting something good. That's actually what we're trying to do with these grow groups, is gain a level of intimacy and earn a level of intimacy. And I know some of the feedback we've gotten is, if you're not used to that, if you're not used to walking into a room where people are kind of revealing some of the inner parts of themselves, it can feel bizarre, because you're so, I think we program ourselves. I mean, think about when you go to work and you say hi, our octave goes high and we're like, great, everything's great, because we're lying half the time. And, it's the water cooler conversations that are really just kind of surfacey. And I wonder how many of us realize that most of our life is spent kind of in that surface realm. So for the first time, pry open some of the things we're really dealing with, to your point, it has to be a place of great trust, and a place that one of the things
you can't microwave that either. That doesn't happen overnight.
Takes time. Yeah. And I was telling the facilitators, we did like a celebration a while back, and I said, you are part of holding people's souls in your hands. And so how we respond and how we care for them and how we share grace and mercy, even if the thing they did was horrendous, that there's a God who redeems, and there's more, just as importantly, a people of redemption joining with you. That, you kind of said, like, lead off the charge with saying these are my sins, right? That if I'm used to being in a community where it's like we all have sinned, we all fall short, yet we can confess to one another and hopefully find that encouragement and maybe even some tips on how to like even start down that route.
And not that I mean, if somebody listening to this and going, man, I'll never do that. That's way too, that's me standing in my underwear for 300 people or so. That's very scary thought to think about. Not that that's the entirety of what the groups deal with all the time. Most of the time, we're vulnerable about all of our life. And sometimes that's just the difficulty of parenting. Sometimes that's there's a conversation with this conference we got going on this week with some of the pastors, or one guy's about to retire, and he's talking about, what do I do? You build your life around your identity as a pastor is connected to, it's connected to Christ, but it's lived out in a setting with a group of people, and then you go away from that group of people, and what's my life going to be defined by now? That's the same. It's the same vulnerability. It's less scary because it's not about personal sin, but it's just as vulnerable because it is about how it's at the emotional level, how you are dealing with and processing the things of your life that are in transformation. So it's not, you go into the group, it's not exclusive if you want to be that, but to your point, it's not going to be that either.
Yeah. Well, my encouragement.
By the way,
Yep, sorry.
Yeah, no, I say that on the subject of greed, though, I think one great conversation to have in a group would be what are the things that are the object of greed? What do we tend to find ourselves sort of grasping onto in life? I tried to pepper in enough things to give some ideas in the message, but for some people it really is about certain material possessions, but other people it's really about like having a certain image in the world, or so what it would be worthwhile to say, make this very, very specific. Yeah. Like what exactly is the source of a personal greed?
Yeah, and I don't even know how to couch this what I'm about to say next, but there's this I don't know if it's like reverse greed, or I don't know how you would say it, but or like passive greed in a way, but for a lot of parents, they work extra jobs or they're trying to get money because they want to take care of the kids, which on the surface is a great thing, right? But then it's like, I want them to be at this prestigious thing and it costs this much. And so it becomes this, strangely enough, a greed issue where it's like, does your kid, do they need to go to that place? Or you're saying literally there's no future for them if they don't get that. And so it's like, how do you poke at that too? How do you poke at, yes, those options maybe are there. And of course, if I love my kid, I want to give them maybe the best chance I can. But how often do we buy into a lie on exactly what best chance actually means?
Well, right. and when I hear that, I hear at what cost? Right. What's it going to cost me to do that? Am I really going to certainly debt and financial costs is a big question with that. Am I really going to take on that debt, go into credit card debt, loan debt, whatever, second mortgage kind of debt, but also all of that extra for some people that there's a physical price to pay as well. The stress and anxiety that goes along with that, and then there's a relational price to pay as well, because you're so consumed by pursuing that thing, your relationships begin to suffer. I think it's the conversation you referenced earlier that you were having with someone, that the relationships are not healthy or strong or vitalized, but it's because they're busy doing all this other stuff to get things. So they're asking the question, what is it costing me to maintain the lifestyle or maintain the possession, is a fair question.
Yeah. And ironically, most of what I'm doing is to set my children up to do the same thing I'm doing, which is to burn the hours away, to have a high-end job where I'm not home. And so it's like we just keep putting people on hamster wheels and then going, hey, what's wrong with society? Or why do we feel tired all the time or depressed? It's like, well, and I love what you said. And I think if I could hand anything off and encourage anyone in anything, is here in America, we do actually have options and choices. Like we get the choice. Now, I know there are some sectors right now where getting a job might be a little harder than other times, but there are lots of things we can jump into. And so I think maybe sometimes the lie my generation of below believes is that our career makes us. It's our identity. It's the thing, like I have to do the job that I've always dreamed of, or I'm not complete. And so that's another part of greediness where it's like, hey, maybe I take not that job and do that for fun. Like I don't make money doing that, but I do the thing I like to do just for fun on the side. Or maybe there's a ministry component to that. And so, yeah, there's so many ways that we could weave this conversation. And so, but ultimately God has placed that control or that option for choosing on us. And it's a big responsibility. And yeah.
It's interesting. I think it's, I would say this. I think it's less of a generational thing by defining it by generation as it is stage of life thing. Because I can think of plenty of examples where my generation was doing the exact same thing and having the exact same thoughts, as that you're having those thoughts. And I think there's a progression through life, and that we're started to ask the hard questions at certain stages and began to settle down with that. So that's an interesting, I've always thought of it as generational distinction, but I think it may be more stage of life distinction.
You're right. Yeah, that's great.